Right, definitely. And I don't want to fuck it up. You know what I mean? Like I feel what I know it could be and what I want it to be. And then it's like that imposter syndrome that we spoke about earlier. Can I deliver on that? And can I
Yes.
even like articulate that on the page? You know, like I feel it, but I
Yes.
haven't like manifested it.
Totally. And this is where you have to say, okay, Fury, you want to come along for the ride? You fucking sit in the back seat, buckle up. You want to be there? Fine, but I'm driving. And that's where you learn to like really be in the moment and you trust.
What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today Podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 263 of the Spun Today Podcast, and in this episode, we have an absolute treat. Writer, director, and actress, Miss Marlene Rhein joins us, and we had a dope conversation that I know all of you will enjoy, especially my fellow creatives out there. Marlene has written, directed, and starred in her own films, like The Big Shot Caller, as well as TV shorts, like the So You Don't Know, as well as others, which we get into during this episode. And she tells us a bit about the differences between writing and directing for a TV short versus a film, which was great. A definite highlight for me was hearing about when she directed a music video for Tupac, the All About You music video, and also a music video for Amy Winehouse before she blew up called Fuck Me Pumps. So it was cool to hear some behind the scenes information about them and those creative experiences from her perspective. And probably the biggest highlight for me, for those of you who listen to follow the podcast, know that I love behind the scenes stuff. I love figuring out how the sausage got made, what goes into creating a thing. And in this case, obviously, films and television. And Marlene was gracious enough to go very granular with details, which I absolutely love, and shared about her writing process, which, spoiler alert, is pen to paper at first, old school, just like me. And then she shifts over to the final draft writing program to write her screenplays. But we discussed that. We discussed budgeting for a movie, how to figure that out, what the different roles do on a set, from a line producer versus an investor versus cinematographer, versus behind the scenes photographer, which, by the way, to me sounds like the illest job on a set. And that's probably just my bias of liking and enjoying behind the scenes type content. But they get to walk around, take pictures, interview folks that are involved with the filming process, and that's super dope in my opinion. Again, probably the best gig on the set is that. We spoke about casting, location scouting, and getting permits if needed. We talked a little bit about the SAG scale rate for actors, how to calculate the total cost of a film, how to figure out the time needed to shoot, and so much more. I truly had a great time chatting with a fellow creative and wanted once again to thank Marlene Rhein for taking the time and just sharing with us. She has a great new film project that she is working on and tells us about called Who is Joy Sriracha, which you, my dear Spun Today listeners, have the opportunity to invest in if you so choose. She tells us about how that works and how your potential investment would be tax deductible and all that good stuff. So again, thank you, Marlene. Really appreciate you for coming on the show. We have a great episode for you fine folks to enjoy. But first, I wanted to tell you all about a quick way that you can help support this podcast if you so choose. And then we'll jump right into the episode. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses, but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host, Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account, where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to Libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, SPUN, to get 2 months free. Or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's Libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. Take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. What's up, Spun Today listeners? Today we have an absolute treat for you fine folks. Our very special guest is a writer, director, actor, known for, but not limited to, The Big Shot Caller, which is a film that she wrote, directed, and starred in. The television shorts that she also wrote, directed, and starred in, which are My Parents Are Crazier Than Yours, and The So-So You Don't Know, where, by the way, she won the New York City Web Fest Award for Best Director. She directed Tupac Shakur's music video, All About You. Yes, that Tupac Shakur. And Amy Winehouse's music video, Fuck Me Pumps. Yes, that Amy Winehouse. And last but certainly not least, she was selected by Filmmaker magazine as one of their top 25 new faces of independent film. Ladies and gents, Miss Marlene Rhein is joining us today. Marlene, welcome to the Spun Today podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome to have you. So, Marlene, you told me a bit about your new film, Who is Joy Sriracha, which has such an original premise that I can't wait for the listeners to hear about a little bit later. So we'll definitely get into all that. But since it's your first time on the pod, I kind of wanted to start in the beginning. What's the origin story of Marlene? Where did you grow up? When did you realize you were creative? How did you get into all this awesome, fun stuff?
Yes, it all started one spring day in Manhattan where I was born.
Nice.
Union Square, to be specific. Anyway, yes, I was born in the city and then grew up on Long Island. And I think like since the age of 4 or 5, I was like always bossing the other kids around on the block. I would be like, okay, we're going to play library. I'm the librarian and you guys are taking up books. And I was just like super bossy pants and like always like creating these scenarios, but I was in them. And I knew like from the gate that, you know, I wanted to kind of just like write, direct, whatever, like create stuff and have it be silly and funny, but then also kind of, I think I developed like compassion for other people at a very early age. And I kind of wanted to make a huge difference somehow. So I thought I'll, you know, creative and make a difference. I'll make movies that really like touch and inspire people. And so I think since I was a kid, it's something that I've wanted to do. And then as I got older and I just was so in love with dance. I love dancing almost even more than filmmaking, I would say. A huge love of music. And when I was growing up in like the 80s, you know, hip hop and its origin, like old school stuff, I just loved. I was always listening to Eric B. and Rakim and Public Enemy, blah, blah,
Nice.
but also like punk music. Yeah, it's huge influence on me. And I decided to like start out with music videos after I studied film at Ithaca College, minored in writing, but like still loved dancing so much. So music videos was kind of like the perfect thing for me at the time. It was like a combination of the poetry, of the juxtaposition of images and music and my passion for music and filmmaking. And so I used my credit cards after college to build a reel, and I started shooting videos for some unsigned rappers and eventually started getting some work. And then 1996, I was awarded what would be Tupac's last video. Budget was like $300,000. We shot on 35 millimeter film over 3 days in LA. And I was directing videos for a while. And then I kind of went over to London because I felt like Europe was going to be more my thing. And they had such a greater sense of artistry and more respect for like cerebral ideas and stuff like that. And I became much more successful directing music videos over there than I was in the States, which felt just very commercial, very like lowest common denominator. Not really, things were created not necessarily for the art of it, but for what would appeal, for marketing, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. And I directed Amy Winehouse on Brick Lane in East London. That was 2004. And eventually music started to change. A lot more boy bands were coming out and I was very disillusioned. And I felt like I wanted to tell stories that mattered. I wanted to make movies. And that's when I kind of transitioned, moved back to the States. I was going between LA and New York, made my first feature film, Big Shot Caller, which co-starred my brother and myself. And that's kind of more about salsa dancing. And then I made a bunch of web series, and I stayed in New York for a while and came back to LA like 4.5 years ago. And now I'm getting ready to make my next film. So that's the origin story.
That's awesome. Definitely a lot there to unpack, some of which I want to go back to if you don't mind. Tell me about, because like the listeners of the podcast and like what I try to put out is not necessarily a roadmap, because everybody's like creative process is different, but kind of expose folks to like different paths. So they're not locked into these like cookie cutter type paths, for lack of a better term, towards achieving and just trying to like walk towards their creative dreams and aspirations. So wanted to ask you a bit about going back to growing up and stuff like that. You're always kind of bossy, and I guess that's definitely like director type vibes. And I would imagine somewhat creative, like with writing early on and stuff like that. Was going to college in Ithaca, was that like your first, where you started taking it like more seriously and something that you knew you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I knew right away like what I wanted to do. So yeah, I studied it there. And I think I was always like kind of shy, maybe doubted myself a lot. Like I had these dreams, but didn't know. And then, when you have to start shooting film projects and showing them to people, once I started like getting reactions to like the comedy in my films, and then I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually good at this. Like people like my stuff. Yes, I'm going to do this, so I kind of got that affirmation there, I think.
Right. It definitely eases that like imposter syndrome type of thing that we all as creative definitely suffer.
Yes. And it doesn't necessarily go away, that imposter syndrome. But I think what happens, and I think we all have self-doubt, but some of us more than others, and I definitely have been riddled with it. It's been a huge hindrance, no doubt. But I think that as you live and you grow and you learn and you read and you hear other people's stories and you realize that we all have it, then it starts to become this thing where it's just this voice in you that you recognize. You say, oh, there's that voice. It's just a thought. And I think thoughts are like for consideration only. And instead of identifying with these thoughts of like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be making this, or I don't deserve money to make my films, then you just start to say, nope, that's not me. That's just a thought. I'm going to keep going. And I think also like making a film or doing anything big or anything where you're kind of exposing yourself, it's vulnerable. Fear is going to like step into the picture immediately. And I think as you grow, you start to learn that when you hit the gas and the fear shows up, fear means keep going. It doesn't mean stop. It means you're going in the right direction actually. And you start to embrace it as opposed to like, let it shut you down.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Like the saying goes, usually your achievements or your dreams are on the opposite side of like the fear or the resistance that you feel from pursuing that. So that's cool. So while you were at Ithaca, which reminds me of the movie Road Trip, by the way.
Yeah.
I can't say that without thinking about that movie. So you started directing, like you mentioned, rap artist videos that were like unsigned artists, and that was like a kind of like a melding of your two passions, like the disciplines that you're learning in school with filmmaking and writing, and kind of finding a way creatively to combine it with a passion that you had and something that music genre that you gravitated towards.
I think so. My project, I think my junior year, my big like film project was actually a Black comedy called Macdeath, where it was like the corporatization of a funeral. I mean, that was my first film. So it's like from the start, I've been like Black comedy all the way. It's my thing. But those were like the film. That was the film I started making. And then I think senior year, my senior project was I made a music video to a Queen Latifah song. And that's when the whole music video idea thing started.
Like you made your own?
My own. I made my own.
Gotcha.
And then she was performing at Cornell, and I managed to get myself backstage, and I sent her the video. And this is back in the day when like it was like videotapes, you know what I mean? Like the 3/4
like
inch
VHSs.
video. And I sent it to her. Yeah. Like, and she had like seen it. It was really cool. We had a moment, and I thought maybe she would hire me for videos, but that never happened. But yeah. But
that just shows your tenacity and your drive to like literally break down the door and like try to get in there and try to get in the mix, right?
Yes. I'm terrified, but I do it anyway. It's like that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Like I'm always like afraid, but I go for it,
Nice. I got to check that out. I like that.
Yes.
So Tell me about the process of, you mentioned putting together reels. Is that kind of like in my mind, I just think of actors, they put together like snippets of things that they've been in, and they try to use that to like leverage it to get like management or agents or something like that. Is that similar to the reels that you put together?
For directing, I think like with the music videos, like I kind of found an artist. I think his name was Daru. That was the first rapper that I worked with. And I used my credit cards and we shot a music video. And then I did a spec commercial for Adidas where I've always been into dancing and choreography. So we got like a bunch of dancers together and I did that. And actually off of that spec commercial, I wound up getting a music video in London where they loved the underground vibe of that so much and wanted me to replicate that. And that was like a huge video for me. So yeah, basically it's kind of like shooting music videos or commercials that you fund yourself just to build a reel.
Got it. Okay. That's what you mean by the spec? By the spec?
Yes.
Adidas thing? Okay. So it's kind of like you shoot it yourself, and it's kind of a gamble, obviously. But it's a way to, on one hand, build your portfolio because it is something creative that you're doing, and also you try to like sell it to Adidas, like you reach out and pitch it to them type of thing.
I can't remember if I sent it to them or I told them ahead of time, and they wound up like sending me a bunch of stuff like clothes and gear and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
But not necessarily like to sell it to them, but it's really just to show that you can direct and to get more directing work.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And like that, it pads your portfolio. And for them, I would imagine on the business side, it's kind of like a marketing, write-off type of thing.
I guess so.
It's kind of like a win-win.
Kind of. I don't know if like they gain that much for it other than like if it's super amazing, then they might use it. And that's happened in a few instances, not with me, but yeah.
Gotcha.
It's a little bit of exposure for them. And then I think like people do that a lot with short films. Like people who want to make movies will create a short of it as a proof of concept. And like Whiplash did that. And then they wound up like getting the funding.
I love
Whiplash.
And
I've made a few shorts.
I love Whiplash.
Yeah, I know. A really good film.
So now tell me about, because that's actually one of the questions that I had for you. Your, I guess, like differences between when you go in with the mindset of, from either writing perspective and directing perspective, I'm curious about between shorts versus feature.
Yes. I mean, shorts are good if you haven't maybe directed that much and you kind of want to prove to yourself that you can do it. It's certainly a good thing. I feel like at this point, because I've done so many, and all the web series I've done, they're kind of like a series of shorts. For me, I'm kind of done with it. I feel like I want to make something viable and big. I want, to make a movie and to get it out there and have it be seen by a lot of people. So I'm kind of done with doing shorts. But I feel like if you're starting out and you haven't really directed that much, it's definitely a good idea to do a short film just to show to yourself that you can tell a story and to show other people like that might be a good way to get funding for the feature. Although, like for me at this point, I feel like it's way too much of an investment of time and money to do that instead of just going to make the movie, Instead
of like just like bootstrapping it and doing it yourself type of thing?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting. Like I've made one feature and I have 3 now I want to make. And there's a hip hop dance movie that I love. It's like my passion project, but it's going to take like at least $1 million to make. And so that's kind of why I took a step back and I wrote this other film, Who is Joy Sriracha, with like 7 locations. It's going to be shot in 2 weeks because I want to make a movie so bad that I knew like, okay, let me write something that's like super doable, super low budget that I'm not going to wait around to like raise money for. I mean, I still have to raise money for it, which is what I'm doing, but it just, in my mind, became something a lot easier and more manageable to do.
Gotcha. Okay. And is that the, when the bass drops?
Yeah. When the bass drops, that's the movie, the passion project movie. Yes.
I saw a snippet of it. I don't remember if it was on your Instagram or YouTube. Maybe, and it definitely gave me, it was pretty dope. It gave me a kind of like Underdog, 8 Mile type vibes.
Yes,
which
exactly.
I'm a big fan of, so.
Yeah, so I shot a short film for that, but yes, exactly. Gotcha. It's very much like 8 Mile. It's like Rocky, but in the world of dance. It's where I play this woman who's like, mid-late 40s, and as a kid loved hip-hop music, wanted to dance, but never followed that dream because she didn't believe in herself, didn't think she could have it because she was an outsider. And then all this stuff happens in her life, and she's like an alcoholic working at Home Depot, and her father is dying, and she comes across this box of old school tapes from the 80s with all the music that she loved, and she pops it into the Walkman that's in the box and starts playing Strafe, Set It Off, and it reminds her of the club day, and she starts crying because the music was what made her feel so alive. And it's a movie is kind of almost like a love letter to that music. You know, it was such a electric time for us in the late 80s with all this amazing music, and people went to the clubs, and there were no cell phones then. So when you went to the clubs and you went to dance, you were connected to people, even if you never spoke to them. And there was an electricity, and it was palpable, and it was like a movement. And I cry sometimes when I think about it, because I miss that. I love music so much, and I love that music so much, and I love the movement that it was. And so this movie is really about that. And it's also about self-esteem and about depression and breaking out of it, and how doing what you love, dancing to music that you love, can lift you up out of the small self you think you are to your destiny, to who you were always meant to become. That's what that movie is about.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. And you touched on something with like the cell phones, like you mentioned, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like all this technology and just like social media and things like that is so prevalent nowadays. When you have on one side, it's like a great tool and option for like creatives to harness it and be able to do things themselves and film things themselves and market things themselves. They don't have like gatekeepers per se. But on the other side, on the flip side of that, you have the inability of like that type of romantic connection with folks, like you mentioned, and times that are just like moments in time that, you know, you're not worried about being like captured on and posted on Instagram, or people are just literally stuck on their phones and zombie scrolling, as they say, and instead of focusing on connecting with the folks that are physically in the room with you and stuff like that. So I definitely give it to you.
It's crazy. Like I go to clubs sometimes because I love to dance, and I just can't believe that instead of dancing on the dance floor, all these people are just filming the DJ. And it's like, and I think also, like, and I write about this a lot, like loneliness is more prevalent now than ever. And I think a lot of it, this disconnected society we live in, it's like everyone is using their phone or filming something and no one is present. And so you get this sense of just being alone in a crowd all the time because everyone is disconnected. But like you said, there are great uses for it. Like I've discovered so many like encouraging things on Instagram, like just scrolling something when someone will say something that I need to hear the most. And so that's beautiful and wonderful. But what if we could manage it better? Like, what if we could like use them less? And then when we're out and social, like connect with people, like that would be ideal. But I feel like mental health in the society is nosediving like fast. And it's because of this disconnection. And I hope that it changes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And it's like a weird juxtaposition between the ability and the technology to be more connected, you know, with anybody in the world than ever before in the history of time, while simultaneously being like siloed and within our own bubbles and couldn't be further apart. It's like such an interesting dynamic there.
Yes, totally.
So I want to ask you from like a creative perspective. So that movie is, and I'm coming from the place of, for example, just to take a step back, I've written a couple of books. I have like my own personal, you know, creative outlets, obviously with writing and with podcasting, but I have my own personal creative goals. Like, for example, I wrote a science fiction time travel novel. I see that as a longer series of at least 3 books, leaving it open for more. And I want to eventually adapt that to screenplays, and eventually pie in the sky kind of like dream of mine is to like see it on a screen.
Yeah.
But I know that different folks, again, going back to an original point that we were speaking about earlier, there's like different approaches. There's no like right way or wrong way. Some folks just like write screenplays directly and, you know, shop those around. Some people, you know, go the route of, you know, adapting like short stories or novels into like series or features. And I'm really interested in what you mentioned of when the bass drops, like that kind of being your North Star creatively is the way I took it. But to get there, you realize from a practical perspective, I guess like kind of more like from a movie business perspective, you realize that you need to take certain steps to get there. in terms of like the funding and so forth, which is where the idea for Who is Joyce Sriracha came from, which to me, I kind of took that as you have not a stepping stone, like in like to belittle it or anything like that, but that it's a way to get off like your creative impulses and your creative outlet, but still going in the direction of what your North Star is in when the bass drops. Does that kind of sort of make sense?
Yes. And tell me about how your science fiction thing, like, where are you kind of like stuck with it? Are you having doubts? Like, where are you at with that?
Well, I wrote the first one. It's been 4 years, I want to say, when I published the first novel. And I, since the beginning, since before writing the first one, it was always honestly, it started as like a short story, and then I just kept writing, and I was like, oh, well, I have enough definitely for a novel. And then it just, how ideas, like when you're writing, they just like grow and start like going in different directions and like evolving into different things. Sometimes that's what happened with that one. And so it was always like, I saw it as a longer work, like creative work. But just like writing the second book, which I did start, but I've started and stopped like dozens of times over the last like 4 years since. And so much so that I distract myself with other writing projects. Like, I get writer's block with that. And then I published last year a collection of short stories, which like I'm proud of and I love. And,
you really want to write
I want to continue that series.
Project.
Exactly. So then, I always go back around to it, and I know I'm going to do it, but it's just getting over whatever like creative humps and hurdles. And I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Pressfield's work and his book.
The War of Art.
Exactly. I love it. It's like complete resistance. You know what I mean? And it's like I have resistance towards that project, so much so that I'm doing other projects, just like blocking myself from doing that. And it's like so frustrating.
So it's this resistance to it because you love it so much. And I think that what the resistance is, it's the fear, it's a protection mechanism. And I am totally going through the same thing too. I can relate to it. It's what happens is there's a part of us that wants to protect us so bad. It wants to protect us from the failure of it not happening or the fear of it not happening. It wants to protect you from the thing that you love the most. And so that's where the resistance comes in, because I think there are these thoughts that say, well, come on, this is like too pie in the sky. You're dreaming too big. It's never going to fucking happen. This is a huge science fiction thing. Or for me, like, it's a huge movie. No one's going to let you star in 1 million, and it's that fear of it not happening that says, okay, well, don't do that because I don't want you to waste your time. I don't want you to spend, months might go by while you're working on this. And then what happens if it doesn't happen? What a waste it will have been. That's right.
Right. Definitely. And I don't want to fuck it up. You know what I mean? Like I feel what I know it could be and what I want it to be. And then it's like that imposter syndrome that we spoke about earlier. Can I deliver on that? And can I even like articulate that on the page? Like I feel it, but I haven't like manifested it.
Totally. And this is where you have to say, okay, Fear, you want to come along for the ride? You fucking sit in the back seat, buckle up. You want to be there? Fine, but I'm driving. And that's where you learn to like really be in the moment and you trust. And I do a lot of things to get to that place, like exercise, because you have to start learning to get out of your mind and not giving your mind control. I do Transcendental Meditation, 20 minutes a day, morning and night.
Nice. I actually just took a TM course online, so I would love to like circle back to that. Yeah, I took the one of those like intro TM courses.
Yes.
That like tell you about it, but I haven't gone to do like the actual, like get my mantra and all that stuff. And I'm hesitating with that even, so I would love to like circle back.
Tell me about that. I have to say it's a game changer. It really is. It's really helped me like alleviate a lot of anxiety, which I deal with, but also like it's hands down been the thing that's allowed me to when you're able to separate from your thoughts instead of identify with them, then your world changes. Because when you identify with these thoughts of fear and lack and blah, blah, then you're frozen and you can't move ahead. But when you can like be the witnesser and say, oh, it's just a thought. There's that thought again. It's like, it's really trying to protect me. It's telling me like, I'm a nobody. Who am I to write this? Blah, blah. You put it aside and you say, okay, I see you there. And you don't fight it, but you let it be and you carry on. And so with your thing, you find a way to say, there's that thought. It doesn't mean anything, but let me it's like being, there's that old Native American phrase, the story about there's two wolves in your head. There's the evil and the good, and they're both fighting, it's like, well, which one is going to survive? The one that you feed. So you choose to dwell in, to swim in, to fly in thoughts of beauty and creativity and enthusiasm and inspiration, because that's the only thing that's real. Love is the only thing that's real. And if you can choose that path, the other stuff is going to go away. It's noise and we all deal with it. But if you choose that, then what happens is you get into the flow. Like for me, I go to this one cafe I love, get my cold brew, whatever, and I sit there and I'm writing. And once I lock into the writing, when you're in that feeling of, I fucking love this, I feel so alive, I can't wait till people experience what I'm experiencing when I write this, you're in the flow. And then nothing can touch you. And so it's just a matter of jumping into that pool and getting into the water, even though there's that fear, it might be cold, do I jump in? You jump in and you get in the water and then nothing can touch you. And so you have to practice getting into the flow. And when you're in the flow, you're okay. And you know you're okay because when you're feeling the love and inspiration, that's the right place to be. That's how you know you're in the right place to be. The other voice, the fear, the doubt, the like, who am I to write this? That's a phantom that you've created in your mind that thinks it's protecting you.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Definitely motivating. So do you feel that with the TM, have you done other like guided meditations, like the Wake Up app or Headspace or anything like that?
I have. I use Aura a lot. And I've recorded a lot of, I'm like a meditation teacher guide on Insight Timer. I have a lot of guided meditations, but I do that. And I do a lot of tapping. It's called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. And they're free ones on YouTube. And I use the free ones on YouTube all the time. And you can tap for anxiety, tap for fear of lack, money issues, self-worth, whatever you're going through, you just put in the YouTube search bar tapping for whatever. And that I feel is very helpful because that actually physically, they call it psychological acupuncture, and that like physically moves the energy through your body. It might be moved to tears, whatever. So I do that. I do guided meditations. Sometimes, like a lot of them, I like to do hypnosis. A lot of them are free on YouTube. I use them all.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you, how would you compare, let's say like TM, for example, like you mentioned, it's a game changer. Is it, because for me, it's kind of hard. Like I've gravitated towards it for like creatives, for example, that I follow and respect, like Rick Rubin, Sam Harris, Jerry Seinfeld, like all these folks that are like proponents of TM. That and I'm like really into their creative work and like their interviews and podcasts and stuff like that. So that's where like I first started learning about TM and kind of like gravitate towards it. But then I've done Headspace, for example, and it definitely helps. And I feel like more centered and calm. And I actually did an episode recently where I spoke about this. I did like a cycling marathon called the 5 Borough that they do here in New York. And cool. I was mentioning, I've done it a few times for a few years in the past with a buddy of mine. And I was mentioning on an episode where I was like breaking down like my experience with it or whatever. And how I was like going up the Verrazano Bridge, which is like the last long incline. And I had kind of this epiphany where I started like just telling myself, breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth, just focus on the breath, like that type of stuff. And I was like, oh shit, there's like practical applications to meditation. And I never like made that connection.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. But I kind of tell myself, I'm like, how much different could TM be than just like guided meditation? You know what I mean?
Well, yes. Yeah. No, totally. It's very different. I'll tell you why. The one thing that I just love about it is what stops most people in their meditation is thoughts that come in and we feel very disturbed by our own thoughts. And TM actually, the way they teach it is you allow them, you don't make any effort at all to try to push them away, or they just coexist in your meditation. Whereas like other meditations, they'll talk about the monkey mind or like whatever. And it's easy to kind of get stopped in your tracks and to lose hope or get frustrated because the thoughts come in. But TM actually, they show you how to kind of use them and how to allow them. And I don't know, it's made a huge difference. It feels very different from other meditations because there's no efforting. There's no like, okay, do this, now try this, now breathe in. Like, no, it takes over and you surrender to it. And it really kind of takes you into a deeper state of relaxation that no other meditation I've tried has done.
That's awesome. I think you just motivated me to actually take the next step and just book like that first TM session there.
Nice. I think it'll make a difference in your life.
That's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that, Marlene. So I wanted to You mentioned, I see the creative trajectory, right? Like when you mentioned going to Ithaca, teaming up with the local rapper, starting to film your own stuff, and just going to clubs, being in that scene, that encounter with Queen Latifah. How did, and since Pac is like one of my favorite rappers, I wanted to go back to like that experience that you mentioned of shooting the music video with him, the All About You. And because I see that connection there, like from grassroots, starting it yourself and just being in the mix and just building up your reels and stuff like that. How do you go from like that level to, all right, now I got this, I think you said like a $300,000 grant or however it works, whatever it's called. You can
budget.
Yeah, budget. There you go. You can, like, how does that leap happen? And then obviously, tell us about the experience with like working with Pac.
Okay. So first of all, it's really interesting because when you're in it at that time, you think, oh shit, I got it made. This is it. Finally, it's happening. Just directed Tupac's video and now I'm made,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like I would get a couple of other tracks in for, music videos to write the ideas for. I did crickets, like nothing. Like after that, I was like back to the struggle, and that was so disappointing. But I mean, and this is like life, constantly forced to pivot and to, you're constantly turned in this direction, that direction. And it's like, what do you do now? Do you despair? Do you, no, you use your resilience and you get inspired for what's next and you create something new. And that's what I feel like I did. I bumped up against a lot of frustration with music videos, but anyway, that's kind of what turned me towards filmmaking and making movies eventually. But to go back to the experience itself, it was very stressful, obviously, because he was such a huge artist. And, sometimes the bigger the artist, the less creative you can be because they have their ideas of what they want it to be. So I didn't feel like creatively it was very rewarding for me at all. The only aspect of the concept that I came up with was to have him like in the bathroom on the toilet bowl looking at magazines of all the girls. Yeah. Like that was my idea.
Nice.
But other than that, there were a few moments when I was like talking to him or hanging out with him on the set, and it was so surreal. And I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. Like we're just talking to each other like human being to human being. And cool. He was down to earth. He was a human, he like had his insecurities. You could kind of see like certain things like, oh shit, he's human like anyone else. And that was wild. And he was nice. I got along really well with him. And at the end he said, I know that you didn't get to spread your wings on this, and I'd like to give you a chance to, do that more. Let's do work in the future. And I was like, cool. And then he died.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's definitely a dope experience though. And
yes.
And that's a dynamic that I would have never considered, where that makes sense. As you say it, like such a big artist, he kind of has his say with things. Within that like music video space, right? It's not like I know, or I've heard at least, you definitely correct me if I'm wrong, like with TV shows you have the showrunner, which is pretty much like the shot caller, whatever they say goes. On the movie side, it's the director who's the shot caller, everything they say goes. But kind of like in the music video, it's like everybody's there because of the artist, so it kind of sort of makes sense that they, especially if they, the bigger their ego or the bigger their star or whatever it is, they kind of get their say more so than other folks that are involved in the whole creative process.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And how was it working with Amy? And was Amy first or Pac first?
Tupac was first, and then Amy. So Tupac was in '96, and Amy Winehouse was in 2004. So 8 years later, and this was before she really blew up in the U.S. She was kind of on the rise in the UK. And
all that time in between,
cool.
sorry to cut you off, but all that time in between, you were still like working with all like a bunch of other artists, like you mentioned, within Europe.
I would say like after the Tupac thing, the same year, I think I went over to England. I was like, oh, it sucks in America. I'm going to go to England. I didn't know anyone. I somehow took risks and found a production company to represent me and tried to get music videos, did a few little things, very tiny things. And then came this one group called Another Level, which was like a sort of put together R&B pop group. And they did a cover of Freak Me by Silk. And we shot also, yes. And that's the one where they saw the Adidas spec and they wanted the exact same vibe, like the underground kind of salmon colored vibe, and I had dancers and I had capoeira and these Rottweilers, and it was like this big budget thing that turned out really cool. And that video went to like #1 in the charts, and I became like one of the top 10 sort of like R&B hip hop video directors in England at that time. And that was an amazing chapter of my life. That was like, I was getting work, I was getting paid well, and I was traveling because like people there in Europe, everything's so close to each other that you could just hop over, do this, that. And everyone was doing that. They'd set an idea like, oh, I want to shoot this in Rome. And that's what I did. And we went and shot a video in Rome. Or I want to shoot this in Jamaica. We went and shot, like, I was able to travel everywhere, get paid for it, stay in hotels, and create. That's was
so cool. That's
best.
Literally the dream.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I mean, looking back, I just wish, I don't know, maybe I did that longer. I don't know. It was wild. It was amazing. And it was great. I felt like a little lonely over there because like people all had their friends and I was there and I was working, but I didn't really have like friends, or there were people I worked with in the film industry, but that was kind of it. Like creatively it was great, but personally not so much. So eventually I kind of came back, and I just, and you sort of think, well, I'm big here. I'm successful doing this. Then I'll just translate that to making movies.
Right. Gotcha.
And I had no idea that it would be so hard to make a movie,
Yeah. Before we get into the movies, I definitely want to go there next. Tell me about Amy Winehouse.
Amy was very cool. She was kind of like a tomboy. Like she did her thing. When we were like filming the video, she would not, I told her like turn a certain way and she would not. She's like, nope, not left side, only right side. Like she was very self-conscious about a certain profile. Very easy to work with, very down to earth, but like I said, tomboyish, And when it was time for the edit, she showed up by herself, not even with like anyone from the record label. And she just saw it. She's like, yeah, cool. Let me watch it again. Yep. My favorite video so far. I love it. Cool. And then she left. She's just like super cool, super down to earth. She was having like some issues with like some guy that she liked at the time. Like she definitely had like, male issues back then, like certain self-esteem regarding men. Like she was like very confident, very cool, but you could kind of see like other stuff happening. Yeah. Right. It's just interesting. I'm always like interested psychologically in like how people grow up and what they're dealing with now as a result. And I was just noticing a lot of that stuff. Gotcha.
And I'll be remiss if I don't ask this. You mentioned that like when you first went over to England, you got signed up with was it a production company or an agency you mentioned?
Yeah. For music videos, you have to be repped by a production company, and that's how you get work.
Gotcha. And to get signed on with them, I would imagine you show them like your stuff, the reels that you've done before, the Tupac video, and stuff like that. And then they like sign you up, and then they try to get you work, and then they get a piece of like whatever it is that you earn and stuff
exactly.
Like that. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And then all those other music videos came like through them. So
yes.
Then eventually you decide to move back to the States. Did you move back to New York or did you go straight to LA?
I think I was like going back and forth between LA and London. And then in like 2002, I moved from LA to New York, back to New York, and stayed there for like 17 years.
Wow. Okay. And what part of New York again?
I was in Manhattan, then I was in Queens I was in Astoria, Queens for many years.
Shout out to Queens, the best borough, of course.
Yes. Yes.
So tell me about your writing process itself. Like you mentioned, you would go to cafes and stuff like that. Is it like pen to paper type style?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm old school. Yeah.
I'm
old
love
school,
that.
And also like writing is such a lonely thing. And so that's why I kind of like to do it at cafes, because you could be alone, but around other people, and you feel like you've been out,
Right.
So I definitely go to cafes and pen and paper first, always sit in the corner, and music inspires me a lot. Like when I wrote my first movie, The Big Shot Caller, I was listening to Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah on repeat because it's just so emotional to me. And I think anything that you want to open the heart, music that opens the heart, it just gets things moving like nonstop. So I'll use music for the preliminary stages, like I'll come up with the characters, and sometimes like lines of dialogue come to me, like I can't shut it off. It's almost like, like those psychics who like see things or You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
clairvoyance, it doesn't stop. For me, like dialogue doesn't stop. That's definitely my strongest point. It's structure and plot that I have problems with. But anyway, I'll create a character. They start speaking to me immediately. I write stuff down. I write jokes down. I write funny things, or very often I'll think of the ending and how emotional, like what do I want to teach people? What's the message here? Is it about hope? Is it that, love conquers all? Is it that you have to look within, and I'll think about what the theme is and what the ending is, and I'll write it down, and then I'll kind of work backwards. I have legal pads. There's so many of them, and I handwrite stuff. And then when I feel like I create what I call the skeleton, and then I plug in plot and character, and then I go to the computer, and that's when I start filling it in with lines of action and dialogue and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay. So real quick, very quick aside, have you heard Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History podcast where he tells a story about how Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah came to be?
No.
You are going to fucking love this story. I'm definitely going to send it to you.
Okay.
So you can listen to like the full thing. It's like a podcast that he has, and he usually tells like 2 or 3 stories within like a half hour. So it's probably like a 10 or 15-minute story. But it's so crazy. I forget who was. I'm just gonna very high level like paraphrase it, but essentially it was the Hallelujah song was written and performed by someone once upon a time, and then that person could never like get it to go, or like the record label that they were on didn't like it, or whatever the case may be. But that person like was really into the song and used to perform it live all the time. And I think it was Jeff Buckley was like in the audience or something, and then asked that person if he could do a rendition of that song, and then they agreed to it. And I'm butchering the story, but then Jeff Buckley started doing it, and there were like a bunch of different versions of it than the famous version now. And his record label wouldn't put it out either. And then it was like on a B-side of something. And one day,
Leonard Cohen.
Yes.
Wait, Leonard Cohen.
Yes. Leonard Cohen. It was like on the B-side of something. And then this housekeeper in Brooklyn was like cleaning this record executive's apartment or house one day. And she just grabs the CD and puts it in. He used to get like, I think like a bunch of like different CDs and tapes and stuff like that to like hear to see if he would sign people or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And she like put it on randomly while she was like cleaning the house, left it in. And then that record exec heard it, then, immediately like signed him or something like that. And like from there is where the song became popular and like blew up and stuff like that. And it's like this beautiful story of like happenstance and like this like sliding doors like type of thing. And I completely butchered the story, so I apologize to anybody listening.
No.
Right,
Oh my God, that makes me want to cry. It makes me want to cry. Do you know why? Because that is the fucking essence. That's the thing. Like as artists, we create things, and in your heart they're beautiful, but these fucking people who decide, who objectively, who judge and decide, no, your shit's not good enough, or I don't like that.
Like the fucking gatekeepers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes. And something so beautiful and divine can like fucking sit in a drawer, never to be seen or heard again because of these bullshit tastemakers with their bullshit taste. Like, and then it's just the miracle of just one person, like, bringing it to light can change everything. Like that is so, it should give us all hope to like keep going. In fact, Maharishi, who's the founder of Transcendental Meditation,
yes,
when asked what is the key to success, he said 2 words: conviction and perseverance, or persistence. Conviction and persistence.
Nice.
And so for us as creatives or artists, your only job is to create your stuff, believe in it, and persist. That's all you can do.
Right. Definitely.
But yeah, dude, that story makes me cry because what a beautiful song. Like, and it could have just never came out because of the world we live in with people and their tastes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And about your writing process. So I do something very similar. I always start like pen to paper, whether it's like a short, like anything, a short story, a longer idea. And actually my first book, which is, I call it The Poor Man's War of Art, because it's very much so within that vein. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Make Way for You, which is a collection of tips for getting out of your own way. And
Nice.
it's a collection of like free writing. So I have a bunch of notebooks where I just do free writing. Like I'll sit, with my pen and paper and just start writing first thing that comes to mind type of thing. Very like flow state style. And then after filling out like a notebook or two, way back in the beginning, when I started, trying to like take writing and like just creative pursuits like seriously, and as instead of just like a side hobby type of thing, I started like reading them back and realized that it was like it became me speaking to myself and like trying to like motivate and inspire myself to pursue writing. And I saw that through line within it, within those like freely written thoughts, and then I put together that first book, which is essentially like a collection of those, and it's very much so like for creatives and stuff like that. But similar to your writing process, like I always start pen to paper, and then if I'm writing like a fiction story, like I'll then, when I get to a point where I know what the story is or how I want it to end or how I want to, if I start with the ending, which I do sometimes, like I know where I want to get to, and then I like work backwards from there. Once I have like enough, then I'll, go to the computer and then start like transcribing things in a writing program called Scrivener is what I use.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I couldn't recommend it enough. It's very user friendly. It's very like Microsoft Word style, but it also gives you a ton of other writing options. Like you can put it like an index card version. You can like move the index cards around, and then it literally like moves the text within the like chapters around. You have like separate like folders for like characters, and you can have like character cards where you fill in like background stories and stuff like that of characters that don't necessarily make it into the like script itself, and a bunch of like cool like little tools like that. But
nice.
But that's like my writing process, so I'm definitely with you.
Very
on that.
similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. Do you write in cafes too?
I don't.
Okay.
That I don't. I usually at home, I would say, or sometimes even like bike riding. Like I'll stop. Like I carry a notebook with me, like a small one. Like I'll stop and write something if like something comes to mind. I write down on my phone. A cool thing with Scrivener is that you can download the Scrivener app as well on your phone. And
oh wow!
Like
so on the go, if you have notes.
Exactly, and then they'll automatically be on my computer, like when I open Scrivener on the computer, so I don't have to like
awesome.
do anything fancy, whatever. It like syncs up like perfectly, so I can like pick up where I leave off, like if I take the subway or whatever.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I definitely recommend it.
No, it's more like for pros though.
Yeah, they have like it's not. I know there's what's that writing program for like screenplays and stuff?
Final Draft.
Final Draft. Yeah, it does.
That's what I use.
Okay, that I was definitely gonna ask you that. It doesn't have like a screenplay version, but it has for pros. It has like a different like short story version or like longer literature versions, and it gives you like a few different formats to like play around with. But it doesn't have a screenplay option.
Okay, no, that's cool. I want to check it out.
Yeah, it's
for my
cool.
Other writing.
And it does like for exporting as well. Like you can export it either like as a PDF or as a Word doc. You can export it as like it gives you like the option to like put it in like the format that like Kindles take, which I forget off the top of my head what it is, but it like walks you through like the whole thing, depending on how you want to export it. So it's pretty cool, and it's pretty inexpensive. I think it was like $60 or $80 like for the program, like in total. So it's pretty. It definitely does a lot for like what it is.
Cool.
Now, about the movies, let's say you're in a cafe, you have an idea for a movie, you start writing it pen to paper, you transfer it to...
And then someone next to me starts talking on their cell phone really loudly.
Yeah, of course. You definitely couldn't.
And then I start pretending I'm on the other line of it. It's my biggest pet peeve. Anyway.
Oh man, I was like that reminds me. I was with a buddy of mine that I do the bike riding with. We took our bikes to like get tune-ups, and then we were at a coffee shop down the block, waiting for the bikes to be ready because they said it would be like 20 minutes, half hour, or something like that. And there was this dude next to us that just sat down, and then he just started talking to me. I knew his whole life story within like 15 minutes, and he was like in construction and how he got into a fight with the foreman, and then he sued, and then he made money, and then from that he didn't have to work again, and then he went. And I was just like, well, I knew his son was a chiropractor, and it all started because I was sitting in my chair and I just like stretched, and he was like, oh, do you have lower back pain? And I was like, no. He was like, oh, because my son's a good chiropractor and blah blah blah. And for like 15-20 minutes he just like chewed our ears off. So yeah,
wow.
I feel your pain.
Well, at least he was talking to you and not into a cell phone, disregarding your personal space. You know?
I know, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, he had the decency to at least try to make a connection. Like these people on their cell phones, like it's as if there is no other world other than theirs, and it doesn't matter how loud they talk. It's like you're captive audience to their whole inane conversation about whatever. It's the worst.
And my favorite is the ones that just like do it on speaker, like as if nobody else.
Oh my God!
Like at all.
Yes,
so you can hear both sides.
So you know what I do? I'm so passive aggressive. I'll like take my phone and I'll video record them, and then I'll play it back so they can hear their loud conversation like play to them as they're on their phone call.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me, how did you get, for example, with the Big Shot Caller? That was your first feature. How was that process from like pen to paper to Final Cut Pro to actually making it? How do you figure out a budget? How do you figure out, I guess, like the number of actors and characters and stuff like that? You know, obviously, because you wrote the script. But how do you like scout for locations? Do you need permits? Is it more or less so the need for permits and stuff like that because it's not like a production company production or something like that?
Well, so in that case, and I suppose with all like low budget indies, first of all, the script can take anywhere from several months to years to write. In that case, I think it was like maybe 6 months with writing and rewriting. And I teamed up with a friend of mine who became the producer, and she had her own little production company. And you'll always have to have a producer or line producer come up with a budget and a breakdown. So in that case, the film was going to take 23 days to shoot, I think over the course of 4 weeks. We had our budget.
And that's what the line producer figures out?
Line producer, yeah. And, you know, because you have your producer, the creative producer is the one who, like, you know, either has the idea or finds the script and wants to shepherd it and kind of take ownership of it. But then a line producer is someone you usually hire who does the budget and is more in charge of that, you know, the tactile elements of production.
So they'll like read through your script and say, okay, to shoot this type of scene and this type of location, it'll cost you X amount of dollars, and we have to shoot for X amount of days, and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, you break it down first into all the locations, and you figure, okay, we have all these locations, this location daytime, this location nighttime, this many actors. Therefore, if we're doing 12-hour days, it's going to take this many days, this many exteriors. And so they know, like, well, you know, locations will cost roughly this amount of money. Actors rate for SAG low budget indie is currently, like, for instance, now is $232 a day. So we have this many characters at this much a day, and they break it down according to days and shoot locations, stuff like that. Equipment, there's a lot that goes into a film budget.
Gotcha. I love that level of like granular detail. So when they break that down, yeah, because for me, I'm trying to like liken it to like my world of just like writing books and stuff like that. It seems similar to like hiring an editor. For example, that'll, you know, you have a line editor, you can have a concept editor, and it depends like what you need. So I'm trying to like make that connection with that there, and I definitely appreciate that level of detail.
Yes. It's a lot goes into it, like the making of the budget, which is preliminary. And then when you find out how much you need, then you go out. And if and when you secure the money, that is when you start locking in dates. You have to put in for permits right away because you're dealing with red tape of a city or whatever, finding locations, hiring a casting director, going through the casting for big and small characters, you're hiring your key crew, like wardrobe, makeup, art direction, you know, TP, all that stuff.
Like all the different departments.
Yes.
And so going back to the securing the budget, does it work kind of like, and I guess it's different for like every like type of film and different like level of film and stuff like that, but is it kind of like, okay, this person put up, you know, X amount of dollars, so they own X amount of percentage of the film, or is it like that type of monetary relationship?
Yeah, so with investors, it kind of gets worked out depending on what you want it to be, but it's generally speaking, like investors get 120% of their investment back according to the portion that they funded. Like, let's say it's like 50-50, then, but still it applies. Like, you would divide it after, but it's 120%. And then after they recoup the 120% of profits, then you split 50-50 with the producers, which includes the filmmakers, producers and investors. And it depends, like if you have one investor or several, but that gets worked out with the entertainment lawyer.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, like if I'm an investor, I put in $100, I get back $120 before anybody else gets paid anything, and then whatever's left over from there, then everybody like splits it according to whatever the splits are.
50-50. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's really interesting, and I just found this out, I was talking to a producer the other day. There's a law, or it's been sort of reactivated or reworked, whatever. It's called Section 181. And so for any investor investing in a movie that's shot at least 75% in the U.S., they can claim 100% of it on their taxes. So it becomes a tax deductible write-off. I think unless the film then makes them a lot of money, then the terms change, I believe. But anyway, for anyone out there who wants to invest in my next movie, just bear in mind you can write it off in your taxes. Nice.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So tell me about this next movie. Who is Joy Sriracha?
Yes. Yeah. So Who is Joy Sriracha is a dark comedy. It's a lot like Christopher Guest films like Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman. It is about this woman who is so traumatized by current events that she splits off into 3 different personalities. And she hooks up with this guy because she's lonely. He's not even the right guy for her, but he is an opportunist. He's a failed musician in a cholo metal band. And he winds up making a documentary about her in order to win enough money to save his abuela's house from going into foreclosure. So basically, he's using her poor mental health to make this documentary. And it's kind of about the violence of today's world, and can you find hope in today's world? Can you find happiness in today's world? But it's also a comedy, and it's very much like a behind the scenes of this documentary with everyone involved in making it. And it's very funny.
That's awesome. I definitely saw the short, like the teaser thing that you have for it. The teaser I made so I play Joy Sriracha and I play her 3 different characters. So in this video, I play the 3 personalities. There's this like German who talks about all the sex she's not having. Then there's the dominatrix goth who's just like everything sucks. And then there's the redhead like New York Colombian character. Anyway, and that's, if you go to like my website, marlenrhein.com, MarleneRhein.com, there's a pop-up for Who is Joy Sriracha, and it'll take you to the page. It's kind of like a GoFundMe. I partnered with a nonprofit, so all donations are tax deductible. Nice. But you'll see the video that I shot on my iPhone with me as the 3 different characters talking about the film and why you should donate. Yes, that I definitely saw. And for folks listening, I will link to it in the episode notes as well, along with all of Marlene's links and website and YouTube and all that good stuff for folks to check out also.
Awesome. And thank you.
One last question.
Hopefully.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. For anyone who like wants to see thoughtful, intelligent comedy films out there that, like I personally scroll through Netflix. I can hardly find anything I like, but if you're looking for like really good, smart, dry, funny content that's inspiring, then support my movies, because that's what I do. Thank you.
Definitely. And supporting creatives is what we love and are all about here at the Spun Today Podcast.
Nice.
One quick technical question that I wanted to ask you about before I let you go. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today and sharing.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. This is awesome. Yeah.
The difference between cinematography and directing. My very, uninformed take on what it is that the director is like the shot caller running the show, and the cinematography is the person that's holding the camera, and the director might say, point it that way, and I want something from like the torso to the person's head or something like that. Is that what it is, or am I like just like watering it down way too much?
So basically, like the cinematographer is also called the director of photography, but it's kind of like the cinematographer is basically like the photographer, and the director is sometimes is the writer, but is the creator, so to speak. So the director is really like the big chief, like the one who's like calling the shots, who's like, this is what I want, this is what we're going to do. And the cinematographer or the director of photography is basically capturing that through the visuals. Like the director will say, I want to do this. Like, I'm thinking like wide shot, blah, blah. And the director of photography will be like, all right, we'll put on a wide lens, like 25 millimeter, 16 millimeter. And then he'll tell his AC, get me the 16 mil lens out of the kit. And he'll tell the gaffer, let's put that light over there, throw the ring light here, or he'll like throw all the technical terms out to his department to set up the shot in the way that the director sees.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then, of course, sometimes you have really bossy director of photography who like don't agree, and they're like, no, that's ridiculous. This should definitely be a tight shot. We should put a long lens and should go out of focus. And, you know, you have these people who like insist that they know what's better, and that's a different story. But for the most part, yeah, the director's in charge. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. That's always something I wondered. And that's cool. The cinematographer is the director of photography.
Director. Exactly. And for short, DP.
Got it. Okay. I always thought for some reason in my mind, like the director of photography was like, you know, like at the end of movies when they show credits and stuff like that and you see like still photos. I always thought that was the director of photography. That's all they did. Like somebody walking around taking pictures on set type of thing.
Oh, no, that's the behind the scenes photographer.
Oh, okay. Nice.
BTS. Yeah. In fact, I was just talking to the line producer who did my budget for Who is Joy Sriracha. I was like, we need money in here for behind the scenes photographer. And that's someone who like goes around, takes pictures behind the scenes, interviews people too, you know, that whole thing.
That's awesome. Okay. That sounds like definitely a dope gig there.
Yeah.
All right, Marlene. Well, thank you once again for taking the time to come on the show. Really, really a dope conversation. And I can't wait to see Who is Joy Sriracha, and definitely can't wait to see when the bass drops after that.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm grateful to have been on your show.
Thanks. Talk to you later, guys. Peace. And that, folks, was episode 263 of the Spun Today Podcast. How dope was that episode? I want to hear all about it, all your thoughts. Hit me up in the comments on IG, Facebook, YouTube, directly on my website, in the comments section, or email me at Spun Today on everything. All of Marlene's contact information will be linked in the episode notes, whether it's the landing page for the Who is Joy Sriracha. You guys can go support her IMDb, her social media, and all that good stuff. Also, special shout out to Tink Media, by the way, which is a dope site where Marlene and I connected, and I've connected with other podcasters and potential guests. It's a way for podcasters and guests to interact and go on each other's shows or promote each other's shows. So fellow podcasters out there should definitely check that site out, tinkmedia.co. I'll link to that in the episode notes as well. And of course, special shout out and thank you once again to Marlene Rhein for taking the time to come on the Spun Today Podcast. You absolutely have an open invitation. I can't wait to see more of your films get made and come to fruition. And that, folks, once again was episode 263 of the Spun Today Podcast. Please stick around for a couple more minutes so you can hear about different ways you can help support this show if you so choose. Until next time, peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today Podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today Podcast financially by going to spuntoday.com/support. There you will find a couple different ways that you can do just that, some of which will actually not even cost you a dime, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. When you go to spuntoday.com/support, you'll see my affiliate link to Amazon. Click on it and it will take you to Amazon's website, where you can do your shopping like normal. This will not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will pay me for driving traffic to their website. If you'd like to support the podcast more directly, you can do so by becoming a patron at spuntoday.com/support. You'll also find my Patreon link. This is where creators such as myself can be paid directly by patrons like you. You can either make a one-time donation or schedule recurring donations if you so choose. There are also different tiers of support, and depending on which you decide to go with, you'll also receive some perks in return, such as early access to content, free digital copies of my books, free bookmarks, etc. That is, again, by supporting via my Patreon link, available at spuntoday.com/support. Similar to Patreon, at that same location, you'll also find my Ko-fi link as well as my Buy Me a Coffee link. They work very similar to Patreon and are different ways that you can help support the show financially. And last but certainly not least, you have the good old-fashioned PayPal donation button. Any which way that you choose to support is greatly appreciated. It all helps me do more of what I love, which is writing and podcasting. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support. You can also support the Spun Today podcast by rating and reviewing the show wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. I'd really appreciate it because it really does help. Also, follow me on all socials. At Spun Today on X, formerly known as Twitter. At Spun Today on Instagram. And at Spun Today on YouTube, where you'll not only find full-length episodes of the podcast, but also chopped up clips and additional content. And of course, you can follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Another way you can help support the Spun Today podcast and also upgrade that stale wardrobe of yours is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the banner for Stitch Fix. Once you do, you'll enjoy a $25 discount to your first purchase. And the way Stitch Fix works is pretty cool. I use it and I've never been disappointed. You'll set up a profile. You'll put in all the sizes for your clothes, as well as all the different brands and types of clothes that you like to wear. It's really simple and intuitive to set up. They'll show you pictures and pretty much give you a thumbs up or thumbs down option on if you would wear something or not. And you get to select all the brands that you already are used to wearing. With this information, there are thousands of passionate, trend-setting stylists will curate a Stitch Fix box for you. They'll send you 5 items that you get to preview before they mail it to you, and you'll get to select based on the image if you like it or not. If not, they'll replace it with something else, and if so, they'll mail it to you absolutely for free. You can try everything on, and you have a few days to send everything back or keep the stuff that you want to keep. Then you can use that $25 credit that I mentioned towards your purchase of those items. Again, to freshen up your wardrobe and also support the Spun Today podcast, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on my affiliate link banner for Stitch Fix and enjoy your $25 credit. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account, where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, to get 2 months free, or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. Take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.